The fierce clash of swords echoed across the windswept shores of Actium, a sound that would seal the fate of an empire. It was September 2nd, 31 BC, and the Mediterranean Sea churned with the violence of conflict. Cleopatra, adorned in regal splendor yet gripped by trepidation, watched from her gilded vessel as Roman legions surged forward. Her heart raced, not merely from the clamor of battle, but from the knowledge that the tide of history was sweeping against her. Mark Antony, her ally and lover, commanded his troops with fervor, but as the sun climbed higher, it became clear that their forces were outmatched. The Roman navy, led by Octavian, bore down upon them with a precision honed in countless wars. Antony's fleet, though fierce, found itself ensnared by a sudden storm, a treacherous twist of fate that turned the tide of battle. Gales roared, splintering ships and scattering men like leaves in a tempest. Retreat! Antony's voice thundered over the cacophony, but the order was lost amidst the chaos. Cleopatra felt a chill in her bones as she witnessed her forces falter, the once mighty army crumbling under the weight of despair. The shimmering waters of the bay, once a symbol of her kingdom's power, now turned crimson with the blood of the fallen. The very fabric of her reign was unraveling. As the smoke from the burning vessels rose to the heavens, a sense of impending doom enveloped her. She turned, desperation clawing at her throat. "We cannot lose like this," she whispered to her attendants. "Egypt's glory must endure." But even as she spoke, the reality sank in, victory slipped further from her grasp. In the tumult, news arrived like a dagger. Antony's forces, once formidable, had fractured. Many soldiers had fled, abandoning their posts, their loyalty eroded by fear. Cleopatra's heart sank. It was not just a battle lost, but a betrayal of epic proportions. She could almost hear the whispers of history questioning her strength, her resolve. Was her legacy, entwined with Antony's, doomed to fade in the annals of time? Suddenly, a vision of her children danced in her mind. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, and the twins, Alexander and Cleopatra Selene. Their futures were now entangled in the chaos of a crumbling alliance. Would they be remembered as the heirs of a fallen queen, or would they rise to reclaim the glory of Egypt? As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the battlefield of Actium, Cleopatra steeled her resolve. The flames of defeat flickered dangerously close, but her spirit, like the ancient Nile, would not be easily extinguished. But to understand how we got here, in 69 BC, amidst the sun-bathed landscapes of Alexandria, a child was born into a dynasty shaped by ambition and turmoil. Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt, emerged into a world painted with colors of power and intrigue. Her lineage traced back to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had seized control of Egypt following the death of Alexander the Great. The Ptolemies were known for their complex marriages and political maneuvering, a legacy that would profoundly influence Cleopatra's own journey. From a young age, Cleopatra was immersed in the rich tapestry of Egyptian culture, steeped in the echoes of the past. The bustling markets of Alexandria, filled with the scents of spices, papyrus, and incense, offered a sensory feast. She roamed through the great library of Alexandria, a wonder of the ancient world, home to countless scrolls and texts that spoke of philosophy, mathematics, and history. Here, amidst the hushed whispers of scholars, she absorbed knowledge that would later empower her reign. Her father, Ptolemy XII, or Letes, ruled Egypt during a time of great instability. The kingdom was caught in a vice between the ambitions of neighboring powers and the endless rivalries within its own walls. Orles, often described as a weak ruler, relied heavily on Roman support, a choice that would cast a long shadow over Cleopatra's own reign. As she grew, she witnessed the political machinations that surrounded her family, a world where alliances were forged not just through love, but through strategic marriages and betrayals. In 51 BC, at the tender age of 18, Cleopatra ascended to the throne alongside her brother Ptolemy XIII, a boy of just 10 years. The young king was a pawn in a game far larger than himself, manipulated by advisors who sought to control the throne for their own ends. Cleopatra, however, was determined to carve her own path. Her mother had vanished from the historical record, leaving Cleopatra to navigate the treacherous waters of power largely on her own. She was not merely a figurehead, but a woman of intellect and ambition, fiercely protective of her heritage and her people's independence. The tension in Alexandria was palpable. The city, once a beacon of culture and learning, was now rife with discord. Citizens were divided, torn between loyalty to their pharaoh and the rising influence of Rome. Cleopatra's early years were marked by a civil war against her brother, a battle for control that would force her to forge alliances in unexpected places. The streets echoed with the sounds of conflict, the clash of swords, and the cries of citizens caught in the turmoil. One of her early allies was a man named Julius Caesar, a name that would become synonymous with power in the Roman world. In 48 BC, as Cleopatra faced mounting pressure from her brother's forces, she took a bold step that would alter the course of history. With cunning and courage, she arranged to meet Caesar, smuggling herself into the palace wrapped in a rug, a story that would become legendary. This audacious act was not merely one of romance. It was a strategic move to secure her throne and restore Egypt's independence. Caesar, known for his military genius and political acumen, was captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence and charisma. Their relationship was not just a love affair. It was a political alliance, one that allowed Cleopatra to present herself as both the Queen of Egypt and a formidable player in the Roman political arena. She bore him a son, Caesarion, a symbol of their union, whose very existence would create ripples through history. Yet this alliance was not without peril. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated, leaving Cleopatra vulnerable once again. The political landscape shifted drastically, and she was forced to reconsider her alliances. The death of Caesar marked a turning point, one that plunged Rome into chaos and left Cleopatra navigating a treacherous path filled with new adversaries, including a young Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Meanwhile, her brother Ptolemy XIII, driven by jealousy and ambition, had died in the conflict, leaving Cleopatra as the sole ruler of Egypt. Yet, the scars of civil war remained, and Cleopatra found herself entrenched in a struggle not just for her kingdom, but for her very identity. The weight of her heritage pressed on her shoulders. She was not just a queen, but a woman bearing the expectations of an entire dynasty. Amid this backdrop of political maneuvering, Cleopatra's relationship with Mark Antony blossomed. The Roman general, known for his charm and military prowess, initially sought Cleopatra's support in his own battles against Octavian. Their partnership, however, quickly evolved into a passionate love affair, one steeped in politics and ambition. Together, they dreamed of creating a new empire that stretched from the sands of Egypt to the heart of Rome itself. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC would become the defining moment of their alliance. Cleopatra stood at the helm of her fleet, the Mediterranean Sea shimmering under the sun as her ships prepared for battle. The stakes were high. Failure would mean the end of her reign and the very identity of Egypt. As the winds howled and the waves crashed, the sounds of war loomed closer, a harbinger of the conflict that would soon unfold. The battle was not merely a clash of armies, it was a collision of two worlds, the ancient traditions of Egypt against the burgeoning might of Rome. Antony's forces, despite their valor, were outmatched. Cleopatra watched from afar, her heart heavy with the weight of destiny. The fleet fractured, chaos reigned, and the once mighty alliance began to crumble. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, Cleopatra faced the reality of her defeat. The world she had known was slipping away, replaced by a stark new landscape dominated by Octavian's ambition. The years of turmoil had taken their toll, and Cleopatra was left to ponder her next moves. Her legacy, once a tapestry of power and influence, now felt like a fragile thread hanging by a delicate strand. But even in the face of despair, Cleopatra remained resolute. She understood that her identity was not simply tied to her reign, but to her very being as the last of the Ptolemaic line. The weight of her ancestors pressed upon her, urging her to reclaim her narrative. She had defied the odds before, and she would do so again, navigating the labyrinth of power with the cunning that had defined her life. In the quiet moments of reflection, as she gazed at the waters of the Nile, Cleopatra contemplated the legacy she would leave behind. The stories of her life would echo through the ages, a testament to a woman who wielded her intellect and charm in a world dominated by men. The battlefield of her heart and mind was just as formidable as any war she had fought. The tides had turned, and the sands of time shifted beneath her feet. Yet Cleopatra's story was far from over. Her resolve to protect her children and her kingdom remained unbroken. The stage was set for the final act of her life, a tale of love, betrayal, and an enduring quest for power that would resonate through history. As she prepared to face whatever came next, Cleopatra held steadfast to her belief that her lineage would not fade into obscurity. It would rise again, strong and defiant against the tides of fate. In the end, it was not just the politics of her life that would define her, but the indomitable spirit of a queen who dared to dream beyond the constraints of her time. Cleopatra's legacy, woven with ambition and heartache, would continue to captivate the minds of generations to come, challenging the perceptions of a woman who was so much more than a mere figure in history. Her journey was one of resilience, a reminder that even amidst despair, the human spirit could rise, echoing through the corridors of time. In the heart of Alexandria, the pulse of ambition quickened. Cleopatra VII stood at the precipice of history, her reign unfurling before her like the sails of a mighty ship ready to catch the winds of change. It was 51 BC, and at the tender age of 18, she ascended to the throne, a beacon of hope and challenge amidst the turbulent waters of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The whispers of the past echoed in the grand halls of her palace, where the legacy of her father, Ptolemy III Aulates, loomed large. His reign had been marred by political strife and the heavy hand of Roman influence, yet Cleopatra was determined to carve out her own destiny. The streets of Alexandria thrummed with life. Merchants hawked their wares in the bustling agora, where the scent of spices mingled with the tang of the Mediterranean Sea. Here, the Library of Alexandria stood as a monument to knowledge, its scrolls holding the wisdom of the ages. Scholars and philosophers debated the nature of the universe under the watchful gaze of the gods, their ideas weaving together the fabric of society. Cleopatra understood the importance of this knowledge. She immersed herself in the arts of diplomacy, rhetoric, and the sciences, striving to elevate her kingdom's status in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. Yet, even as she embraced her role, a shadow loomed. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, only a few years younger, was not merely a sibling but a rival. Their shared throne was a precarious balance, and the whispers of discontent grew louder. The people of Alexandria were restless, eager for a ruler who could restore the glory of Egypt. Cleopatra knew that to quell this unrest, she had to be more than a figurehead. She must command respect and loyalty, not just from her subjects, but from the powerful Romans who held sway over her lands. By the spring of 48 BC, Cleopatra's world shifted dramatically when Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria. A figure larger than life, he was both a conqueror and a statesman, with ambitions that reached beyond the shores of Egypt. The moment she laid eyes on him, Cleopatra recognized an opportunity. She had her guards roll her into his presence, wrapped in a luxurious carpet, a bold entrance designed to intrigue and disarm. "I am Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt," she declared, her voice steady, the weight of her lineage behind her. Caesar was captivated. He saw in her not only beauty, but also intelligence and ambition. Their relationship blossomed, entwining personal and political motives. Cleopatra bore him a son, Ptolemy IV Philopator Philometor Caesar, affectionately known as Caesarion. In the eyes of her people, this union was a lifeline, a chance for Egypt to reclaim its power. "Egypt shall be great again," she proclaimed, rallying her people with the promise of a united front against the encroaching Roman influence. As the sands of time shifted, the political landscape became increasingly treacherous. In Rome, the winds of change were blowing fiercely. The Senate was divided, and Caesar's growing power ignited jealousy and fear among his peers. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, the unthinkable happened. Julius Caesar fell victim to a conspiracy, stabbed to death by those he once considered allies. The shockwaves reverberated through the Mediterranean, and Cleopatra, now a widow, was left to navigate the dangerous waters of Roman politics without the anchor of her powerful lover. In the aftermath of his assassination, Cleopatra's resolve hardened. She returned to Alexandria, her mind racing with thoughts of survival and power. What now? She pondered, her kingdom at the mercy of fate. The soldiers who had rallied to her cause now looked to their queen for guidance. She understood that the death of Caesar would not spell the end of her ambitions. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter. Mark Antony emerged as a powerful figure in the wake of Caesar's demise. He was a general and a close ally of Caesar, but his ambitions were as fierce as Cleopatra's. Their paths converged, and soon they found themselves drawn to one another. Antony travelled to Alexandria, seeking to solidify his alliance with the queen. "We are bound by destiny," he declared, his voice filled with conviction. Cleopatra, recognizing the potential of this partnership, began to weave a new narrative, one that would intertwine her fate with his. By 40 BC, their alliance bore fruit. Cleopatra bore Antony 3 children: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. The queen envisioned a future where her lineage would unite the worlds of Rome and Egypt, a powerful dynasty that would ensure her legacy. Yet the challenges of maintaining her grip on power became increasingly daunting. The Roman Senate viewed her with suspicion, fearing her growing influence over Antony. Antony's decisions began to alienate him from Rome. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC would become a turning point in their story. Cleopatra's forces, alongside Antony's, faced a formidable fleet led by Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. The stakes were monumental. As the battle unfolded on the waves, Cleopatra stood on the shores, her heart racing with anxiety. She believed in their cause, yet the sight of Antony's fleet fracturing filled her with dread. In the chaos of battle, Cleopatra's strategic mind raced. "We must retreat," she urged Antony, the urgency palpable in her voice. But the tides of war are capricious, and Antony's pride led him to a fateful decision. The defeat was catastrophic, and the consequences were immediate and far-reaching. As the dust settled, Octavian emerged victorious, and Cleopatra's world began to crumble. In the months that followed, the whispers of betrayal turned into roars. Antony's reputation was tarnished, and Cleopatra was painted as a seductress, a foreign queen who had ensnared a Roman hero. The people of Rome turned against them, fueled by propaganda and fear. Cleopatra felt the weight of their disdain, the tension in the air thickening like the humidity before a storm. Desperation gripped her heart as she contemplated the future of her children. "What legacy shall I leave?" she pondered, her thoughts swirling like the currents of the Nile. She summoned her advisors, seeking counsel in the face of impending doom. "We must take action," she insisted, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We cannot allow our lineage to fall into obscurity." Antony, consumed by his own despair, struggled to rally his forces. The battle was not only against Octavian's legions, but against the tides of history itself. Cleopatra watched as his resolve waned, and she understood that the moment of reckoning was drawing near. "We must unite," she urged him, the fire of her ambition igniting once more. "Our children are the future of this land." In the quiet moments that followed, the couple shared their fears, their hopes, and their dreams. Cleopatra spoke of a united front, a legacy that would endure beyond their lifetimes. "Together, we can forge a new destiny," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of the torches illuminating the darkened room. Antony nodded, a flicker of determination igniting within him. But fate is not easily swayed. The tides of war surged ever onward, and soon their options dwindled. As Octavian's forces closed in, Cleopatra and Antony found themselves cornered, their dreams crumbling like the sands of the desert. The once great Queen of Egypt felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her, the realization that her ambitious dreams might evaporate into the night like the fading stars. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, and with it, the spectre of annihilation. Cleopatra stood upon the precipice of history, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had fought valiantly for her kingdom, for her children, but the fates were not in her favor. "I shall not let my story end in defeat," she vowed, her resolve firm, her spirit unbroken. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows across the land, Cleopatra prepared to make her final stand. She had woven a narrative rich with ambition, love, and tragedy, a tale that would resonate through the ages. "I will not fade into obscurity," she whispered into the night, a fierce defiance lighting her path as she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The air in Alexandria was thick with tension as the summer of 30 BC approached. Cleopatra, now facing an unrelenting storm of conflict, grappled with the harsh reality of her situation. Her beloved city, a beacon of culture and commerce, was now a battleground for power, ambition, and betrayal. The Roman Republic, once a potential ally, had turned into a formidable enemy, and the heart of her world was about to shatter. The news of Mark Antony's defeat at Actium on September 2nd, 31 BC, reverberated through the city like a death knell. Antony's forces, outmatched and disorganized, had seen their fleet fractured, leaving them vulnerable to Octavian's relentless advance. Cleopatra, who had watched the battle unfold from the safety of her palace, felt the weight of despair settle over her like a shroud. As the once mighty commander returned to Alexandria, his spirit was as fractured as his fleet. In the days following the battle, the streets of Alexandria buzzed with murmurs of impending doom. Octavian's legions are on the march, a merchant whispered to a customer, the scent of spices and bread mixing uneasily with the aroma of fear that clung to the air. They say he aims to take the city before the harvest. The people's eyes darted about, seeking assurances from their leaders, but the only answer they received was silence. On a fateful evening, Cleopatra summoned her trusted advisors to discuss their dire situation. "We must prepare for the worst," she stated, her voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty beneath. She recalled the words of Josephus, who wrote of her determination. She was not afraid of danger, nor did she shrink from any peril. Yet, even her formidable resolve faltered when faced with the reality of Octavian's ambitions. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the marble columns of her palace, she turned to her council. "We have a choice to make. We can surrender, or we can fight, but we must be united." The silence that followed was palpable. The tension hung heavily, as if even the gods themselves held their breath. Antony, his face etched with worry and defeat, interrupted her thoughts. "We cannot allow Octavian to take our children from us. He will not stop until he has extinguished all traces of our lineage." His voice, a blend of desperation and fierce loyalty, echoed through the room. Cleopatra's heart ached at the thought of her children, Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar, and her twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Their futures were now intertwined with the fate of a crumbling empire. Determined to take matters into her own hands, Cleopatra decided to meet with Antony. The two would strategize, not just for their survival, but for the legacy of their children. As she approached his quarters, the sound of their shared laughter from days gone by seemed to haunt the hallways. Once, they had dreamed of ruling an empire together, but now those dreams lay in ruins. "We must gather our forces," she urged, entering his chamber. "We cannot let Octavian dictate the terms of our fate." The flickering oil lamps cast a warm glow, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of their circumstances. Each moment felt like an eternity, stretching thin with the threat of the unknown. Antony, his brow furrowed, replied, "I will call upon the remaining allies, but their loyalty is waning. They fear Octavian's wrath." As he spoke, Cleopatra could see the flicker of hope fighting against the encroaching darkness in his eyes. They were cornered animals, but they would not go down without a fight. Over the next few weeks, the city braced itself for war. The cobblestones of Alexandria rang with the footsteps of soldiers preparing for a confrontation. Cleopatra and Antony dispatched messengers to their remaining allies, rallying troops and resources. The city's markets became bustling centers of activity, with merchants trading arms and supplies instead of the usual goods. The air was thick with the scent of iron and sweat, mingling with the sweetness of desperation. But as Octavian's forces drew closer, cracks began to form in the fragile alliances Cleopatra had worked so hard to maintain. She learned through whispered rumors that some of her allies were negotiating with Octavian, seeking to save themselves rather than stand beside her. "They are cowards," she said bitterly to Antony one evening, as they surveyed the preparations from the palace balcony. "They would sell us out for their own safety." Antony, less optimistic than Cleopatra, replied, "We must rely on those who remain loyal. Perhaps they can turn the tide in our favor." Yet, as the days passed, the reality grew starker. Octavian's legions had laid siege to their city, blocking supply routes and tightening the noose around their necks. The first clash of arms echoed through the narrow streets of Alexandria on a bleak morning in late August. Cleopatra stood upon the palace steps, watching her soldiers march, their faces set with grim determination. The clash rang out like a funeral bell, signaling a fight for survival. The sun beat down mercilessly as she turned to her general. "We must hold our ground. We cannot let them breach the city walls." As the battle raged on, the human cost became painfully evident. The cries of the wounded mingled with the clash of swords, creating a cacophony of despair. In the chaos, a soldier fell at Cleopatra's feet, blood staining the dusty ground. She knelt beside him, her heart racing as she grasped his hand. "Hold on, brave one," she urged, though she could see the light fading from his eyes. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." He gasped for breath, his voice barely a whisper. "My queen, we fight for you. For Egypt." With that, his spirit left his body, and the weight of his sacrifice settled upon her shoulders like lead. In that moment, she understood the enormity of her responsibility. This was not merely a struggle for power, it was a fight for the very essence of their culture, their identity. As the siege continued, reports from the front grew darker. Each day brought news of casualties, and every night Cleopatra found herself pacing the marble floors of her palace, anxiety gnawing at her insides. The once vibrant city, filled with the laughter of children and the chatter of merchants, had transformed into a ghost town, its heart slowly being ripped out. By early September, the situation had grown dire. Food shortages plagued the city as Octavian's forces cut off supplies. The once bustling markets lay eerily silent, their stalls empty. Cleopatra had to face the stark truth. Her people were starving. "We cannot allow our citizens to suffer," she said to Antony, her voice trembling with fear. "We must find a way to break the siege." Desperation led her to consider a bold move. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, devised a plan to sneak out of the city under the cover of night. "If we can break through their lines, we may be able to rally support from the surrounding territories," she reasoned. "We cannot remain prisoners in our own city." Antony was hesitant. "But what of our children? We cannot abandon them." The thought of leaving her children behind was unbearable. Yet, the fate of Egypt hung in the balance. "They are our future, my love," she insisted. "If we do not act now, we risk losing everything." As the night descended on Alexandria, Cleopatra prepared to implement her plan. Cloaked in darkness, she gathered a small group of loyal soldiers and snuck through the back alleys of the city. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke and despair, the distant sounds of battle echoing in her ears. They moved swiftly, hearts pounding in unison. But as they approached the enemy lines, the oppressive weight of fate bore down upon them. The decision to fight or flee loomed large. Would they succeed, or would they fall, just like so many before them? In the chaos of war, one truth became painfully clear. Every choice, every sacrifice, would echo through the annals of history. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, stood at the precipice of her legacy, and the world watched as the storm gathered, ready to unleash its fury. In the summer of 30 BC, the air in Alexandria was thick with tension, a palpable sense of impending doom. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, stood at the edge of her world, watching as the shadows of defeat gathered around her and her lover, Mark Antony. The city, once a beacon of culture and power, had transformed into a stage for tragedy, where the ambitions of men clashed with the dreams of a woman determined to preserve her legacy. On the morning of September 2nd, 31 BC, the Battle of Actium unfolded across the waters of the Ionian Sea. Antony's forces, bolstered by Cleopatra's loyal fleet, faced off against the disciplined navy of Octavian, the future emperor of Rome. The stakes were monumental. It was not merely a battle for territory, but a fight for existence. Antony, fueled by desperation and passion, commanded his ships with fervor. Yet, the odds were against him. The Roman historian Plutarch chronicled the chaos. The ships of Antony were scattered, the winds turned against him. The once united fleet splintered under the relentless assault, and the hopes of a united front began to dissolve like mist under the morning sun. Cleopatra had watched from afar, her heart heavy with dread. The sounds of battle, the clash of oars, the shouts of soldiers, the cries of wounded men, echoed in her ears, a haunting symphony of loss. As the tides of war turned, Antony made a fateful decision. In a desperate bid for victory, he ordered a retreat. In that moment, Cleopatra's heart sank deeper into despair. The very man she had allied with, the father of her children, was now a man on the brink of ruin. This was a turning point that would alter the trajectory of their lives and the destiny of Egypt. The chaos of the battlefield was a stark contrast to the serenity of Alexandria's gardens, where she had once strolled with dreams of dynastic glory. Now, those dreams lay scattered like the remnants of Antony's fleet. In the aftermath of Actium, as Antony's forces crumbled, he retreated to Egypt, where the whispers of betrayal filled the air. Octavian, seizing the opportunity, advanced steadily toward Alexandria, his eyes set on dismantling the last vestiges of Ptolemaic power. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, understood that the time for action was now. She gathered her advisors, her closest confidants, and plotted her next move. The stakes were higher than ever. Her children's futures hung in the balance. Cleopatra met with Antony in the royal palace, the opulence of their surroundings a stark contrast to the turmoil outside. "We must rally our forces," she urged, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. "We have not yet lost everything." Antony, weary and disheartened, looked into her eyes, searching for the fire that had once inspired him. "What hope remains?" he asked, a shadow of the man who had once conquered the hearts of nations. "Hope lies in our unity," Cleopatra replied, her voice laced with an urgency that stirred something within him. "Together, we can withstand this siege. Together, we can reclaim what is rightfully ours." Her words ignited a spark, and for a moment, the weight of despair lifted. They began to strategize, drafting plans to fortify their defenses and rally the citizens of Alexandria. Cleopatra knew that she had to inspire her people, the citizens who had once celebrated her reign and her lineage. But as days turned to weeks, Octavian's forces grew closer, and the walls of Alexandria echoed with the cries of uncertainty. Cleopatra gazed out over the harbor, where the ships of Octavian loomed like dark clouds on the horizon. The scent of salt water mingled with the incense from the temples, a reminder of the divine protection she had always sought. She sought counsel from the priestesses of Isis, invoking the goddess's strength in her time of need. "Grant me wisdom," she prayed, "to lead my people through this darkness." The siege of Alexandria began in earnest. Octavian's soldiers tightened their grip, a relentless pressure that threatened to crush the spirit of the city. Cleopatra, adorned in her royal regalia, took to the streets, determined to rally her people. "We are the children of the Nile. We will not wither under the weight of tyranny," she proclaimed, her voice carrying over the throngs of citizens gathered before her. In their eyes, she saw both fear and admiration, and she clung to that spark of hope. But hope proved fleeting. As the siege dragged on, provisions dwindled, and despair seeped into the hearts of even the most loyal supporters. Starvation became a spectre haunting the city. Plutarch recounted the grim reality. The famine was so great that they were forced to resort to eating the most loathsome of things. The desperation of the people mirrored Cleopatra's own. They were all trapped in a web of their making, struggling against a tide of inevitability. Amidst the chaos, a letter arrived from Octavian, a proposal shrouded in the guise of diplomacy. He promised safety and a place in his new order if Cleopatra surrendered. "He seeks to break us," Antony growled, his anger palpable. "We must not bow to him." Yet Cleopatra felt the weight of his words. The conflict had taken its toll on them both, and the spectre of defeat loomed ever closer. In a moment of quiet reflection, Cleopatra sought solace in her private chambers, surrounded by the rich tapestries that once filled her with pride. She thought of her children, Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, the living symbol of her ambition, and the twins, Alexander and Cleopatra Selene, whose futures hung in the balance. "What will become of them?" she whispered, the weight of her choices pressing heavily on her heart. Determined to protect her legacy, Cleopatra devised a final plan. She sent word to Antony, urging him to gather their forces for one last stand. "If we are to meet our fate, we shall do so as rulers, not as cowards," she declared. The tension in her voice resonated with a fierce resolve, igniting a spark of defiance in Antony's weary heart. But fate had a different design. On August 10th, 30 BC, as the walls of Alexandria trembled under the weight of Octavian's might, Antony faced a crushing blow. News reached him that Cleopatra had taken her own life, a tragic end to their shared dreams. In a moment of despair, he fell upon his sword, whispering her name, as he succumbed to the darkness. The loss shattered Cleopatra, plunging her into an abyss of grief and despair. Yet, her spirit would not be easily extinguished. Cleopatra, faced with the reality of Octavian's approach, turned to the last vestiges of her power. She summoned her remaining advisors, her voice steady despite the tears that stained her cheeks. "I will not be paraded through Rome as a trophy," she declared, her resolve hardening. "I choose my own fate." The legend of Cleopatra's death is shrouded in mystery, but the tale of her passing remains etched in history. It is said that she allowed a venomous asp to bite her, a final act of defiance against the conqueror who sought to claim her. "I will not die as a prisoner," she affirmed, her final act a testament to her indomitable spirit. As the sun set over Alexandria, the city she had fought to protect, Cleopatra's legacy lingered in the air. The whispers of her name would echo through the ages, a haunting melody of ambition, love, and tragedy. The last pharaoh of Egypt may have fallen, but her story would endure, a reminder of the power and complexity of a woman who dared to challenge the world. In the end, Cleopatra was not merely a queen who lost a battle. She was a symbol of strength, a figure who navigated the treacherous waters of power and passion. Her life became a tapestry woven with the threads of history, a narrative that transcended the boundaries of time. As the tales of her reign spread, they ignited the imagination of generations, ensuring that Cleopatra, though lost to the sands of time, would never be forgotten. The aftermath of Cleopatra's death in 30 BC left a profound mark on the ancient world, a tapestry woven from loss, ambition, and the relentless march of power. In Alexandria, the once vibrant streets echoed with the whispers of a city that had witnessed the fall of its last pharaoh. The scent of burnt offerings lingered in the air, mingling with the salt of the Mediterranean, as citizens mourned the loss of a ruler who had embodied both grace and intellect. Octavian emerged not merely as a victor, but as the architect of a new era. He returned to Rome, no longer merely Julius Caesar's heir, but a conqueror in his own right. The triumph he celebrated was not just over Cleopatra, but over an entire lineage, the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt since the days of Alexander the Great. The Senate, eager for a spectacle, prepared to honor him with a grand procession. The spoils of war included treasures amassed from the vast wealth of Egypt, including gold, silks, and the fabled Library of Alexandria, which, despite its decline, still held remnants of knowledge that could enlighten or enthrall. Within the weeks that followed, the Roman populace buzzed with excitement. They marveled at the tales of Cleopatra, whose beauty had captivated even the most hardened hearts. Yet her legacy was painted with hues of tragedy. The poet Horace would later lament the fall of a queen who had once stood as a formidable opponent, her wit and charm eclipsing the very men who sought to dominate her. "The pride of Egypt," he wrote, "the scent of her beauty lingers, but her kingdom is but a shadow now." Meanwhile, in Alexandria, a different kind of reckoning began. The city, now under Roman control, braced for a new administration. The people faced uncertainty, their allegiance shifting like the sands of the Nile. Many had supported Cleopatra, drawn to her as a figure of hope in a land rife with conflict. Now, they found themselves in a precarious position, caught between the remnants of an old world and the ambitions of a new ruler. The citizens looked to the palace, its grand halls echoing with the silence of absence, and wondered what future awaited them. In the days that followed, the children of Cleopatra were at the center of intense scrutiny. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was a living link to a legacy that now belonged to the past. Octavian, keen to eliminate any threat to his power, ordered the boy's execution. In a cruel twist of fate, the young prince, who had been raised in the shadows of greatness, was put to death in an act that symbolized the eradication of the old order. The news rippled through Alexandria, where many mourned not just the loss of a potential ruler, but the extinguishing of a hope that had flickered amid the darkening skies. Cleopatra's other children, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, were spared, but their fates remained uncertain. Taken to Rome, they became pawns in Octavian's political games. Cleopatra Selene, gifted with her mother's intelligence and beauty, would later marry King Juba II of Mauritania, a union that would ensure her survival and perhaps allow her to weave a new narrative in a world that had turned against her lineage. But Alexander Helios, the elder son, faded into obscurity, a victim of circumstances beyond his control, his name lost to history, like so many others swept away by the tide of power. As autumn painted the landscape in shades of gold and red, Alexandria transformed under Roman rule. The once bustling agora, where merchants traded spices and silks, became a place of tension as the local populace navigated the new laws imposed by their conquerors. The grain supply, once a source of pride for Egypt, became a tool of control. Octavian understood that food was power. Thus, he sought to tighten his grip over the vital resources that had sustained Cleopatra's reign. The grain shipments that once flowed freely now faced regulation, stoking resentment among the people who had once flourished under their queen's benevolent hand. The temples, once dedicated to the gods of Egypt, stood silent, their priests displaced or executed. The worshippers who had flocked to the altars of Isis and Osiris now found their prayers drowned in the fervor of Roman deities. The very fabric of Egyptian identity began to fray, as the Romans imposed their customs and traditions, erasing the ancient ways that had defined the civilization for millennia. The triumphal arches erected in Octavian's honor stood as stark reminders of the power shift, overshadowing the rich history of a people who had once ruled the known world. In the wake of this upheaval, stories of Cleopatra's life and reign took on a life of their own. Rumors swirled through the streets of her beauty, her cunning, and her tragic demise. Historians, poets, and artists began to immortalize her, crafting a narrative that blended fact with mythology. Plutarch would later write of her allure, claiming her beauty was not in the form, but in the spirit. Yet, the tales often glossed over her intelligence and political acumen, reducing her to a mere figure of seduction, rather than a queen who had fought fiercely for her kingdom. The Library of Alexandria, once a beacon of knowledge, became a symbol of loss and the fragility of human achievement. The Romans, eager to erase the vestiges of the Ptolemaic dynasty, began to repurpose its resources. Scrolls documenting centuries of knowledge and wisdom were scattered, many lost forever to the flames of ignorance and ambition. The echoes of scholars and philosophers discussing the mysteries of the cosmos faded, replaced by the clamor of Roman governance. The months turned into years, and the legacy of Cleopatra continued to haunt the halls of power. Octavian, later known as Augustus, found that ruling Egypt was not merely about control, but about understanding the hearts of its people. He initiated efforts to integrate Egyptian customs into his administration, recognizing that a heavy hand would not sustain his rule. The festivals honoring the Nile's annual flood continued, albeit now under Roman auspices, allowing the people a semblance of continuity amid the changes. Yet the memory of Cleopatra lingered, woven into the very fabric of Alexandria. The stories of her intelligence and tenacity inspired generations, becoming part of the collective consciousness. Women whispered her name as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that power could be wielded by those who dared to defy convention. Her image, adorned with the royal diadem, graced coins minted in the days of Augustus, a testament to her enduring influence. As the sands of time shifted, the world would come to know Cleopatra not just as a queen who fell, but as a woman who fought fiercely against the tides of history. The annals of Roman history would grow rich with her story, a story that captured the complexities of power, love, and loss. In the twilight of her legacy, Cleopatra's life became a cautionary tale, a narrative that echoed through the ages. The historian Josephus would later reflect on her, noting, "She was a woman of great spirit, who dared to stand against the tide of empires." And so, as the sun set over the Mediterranean, the tale of Cleopatra continued to unfold, a powerful reminder that the struggle for agency and identity knows no bounds, transcending the boundaries of time and culture. The world, forever changed by her life and death, would remember Cleopatra not just as a figure of beauty, but as a queen whose legacy would inspire countless generations, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dare to challenge their fate. The story of Cleopatra, the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt, did not die with her in 30 BC. Instead, it transformed into a legend, a tapestry woven from strands of truth and myth that would captivate generations to come. In the centuries that followed her tragic end, the memory of Cleopatra morphed significantly, shaped by the whims of historians, poets, and artists who sought to interpret her life through their own cultural lenses. By the time of the Roman Empire's vast expansion, Cleopatra had already begun to be remembered not merely as a ruler, but as a seductress, a femme fatale who ensnared the hearts of powerful men. The early Roman historians, like Plutarch, depicted her as a woman of unparalleled beauty and cunning. Her beauty, he wrote, was not in the aspect of her body, but in the charm of her conversation. This perspective, while hinting at her intelligence and charisma, also reduced her to a mere object of desire, rather than an astute political leader who fought to preserve her kingdom's autonomy against the encroaching might of Rome. As the centuries progressed, the interpretation of Cleopatra's legacy became increasingly intertwined with the themes of tragedy and romanticism. In the Renaissance, artists such as Sandro Botticelli and later John William Waterhouse portrayed her as an ethereal figure, embodying both sensuality and sorrow. Their paintings, rife with lush colors and evocative imagery, stirred the imagination and solidified the image of Cleopatra as a tragic heroine doomed by her love for Mark Antony. In this portrayal, her political acumen was overshadowed by her romantic entanglements, eclipsing her true role as a formidable ruler. The transformation of Cleopatra into a figure of myth reached its zenith in the works of William Shakespeare. In his play Antony and Cleopatra, written around 1606, Shakespeare presented her as a complex character, torn between love and duty. Through rich dialogue and poignant soliloquies, he explored the depths of her emotions, depicting her not just as a queen, but as a woman striving to navigate the treacherous waters of love, loyalty, and power. The play's haunting lines have echoed through time. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. This portrayal ensured that Cleopatra would be remembered not just as a historical figure, but as a symbol of enduring beauty and tragic love. In the 19th century, Cleopatra's legacy took on new dimensions. The fascination with ancient Egypt surged during this time, fueled by archaeological discoveries and a burgeoning interest in the exotic. She became a subject of popular literature and theatrical performances, often depicted in opulent costumes, surrounded by the grandeur of her court. However, the focus remained predominantly on her romantic liaisons, reinforcing the stereotype of the seductive queen. This fixation on her allure overshadowed her political savvy and the desperate measures she took to protect her realm. Yet, as the 20th century unfolded, scholars began to reassess Cleopatra's life with a more nuanced perspective. Historians like Stacy Schiff, in her book Cleopatra, A Life, delved into the complexities of her reign, highlighting her acumen as a diplomat and strategist. She was, Schiff argued, a ruler who understood the delicate balance of power, adept at navigating the tumultuous waters of Roman politics. Cleopatra forged alliances not only through love, but through astute political maneuvering, and her desire to maintain Egypt's independence in the face of overwhelming Roman power was a testament to her strength. Her impact on the ancient world was profound, marking a pivotal moment in history. Cleopatra's reign signaled the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of a new era dominated by Rome. The political landscape of the Mediterranean shifted irrevocably as Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. However, her legacy was not solely defined by her demise, rather it was a catalyst for change. The union of Egyptian and Roman cultures led to a syncretic blending of traditions, evident in art, religion, and governance. The image of Isis, the Egyptian goddess, merged with that of the Virgin Mary, influencing religious thought for centuries. Cleopatra's story served as a bridge, connecting two worlds that had long been at odds. The legend of Cleopatra also sparked a dialogue about the role of women in power. Her life posed challenging questions about female agency in a male-dominated society. Over time, she became emblematic of the complexities of womanhood, both revered and reviled, celebrated for her beauty, yet dismissed for her intellect. This duality has inspired countless interpretations, from feminist readings that reclaim her narrative to critical analyses that explore the consequences of her choices. Each retelling, whether in literature or film, reflects the evolving societal attitudes toward women in leadership and the intricacies of their struggles. Her death, often romanticized as a final act of defiance, has been subject to speculation and intrigue. The tale of Cleopatra allowing a poisonous snake to bite her, an image steeped in drama, has become a symbol of her unwillingness to submit to defeat. Yet, it is important to recognize that the historical accounts of her demise are varied. Some suggest that she may have taken poison, while others believe she was murdered. The ambiguity surrounding her end adds to the mystique, ensuring that her story remains a focal point of fascination. Cleopatra's legacy also extends to the realm of popular culture. From films to novels, her life has been reimagined and reinterpreted, often stripped of its historical context in favor of sensationalism. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, epitomized this trend, focusing on lavish spectacle and romantic drama at the expense of historical accuracy. While it introduced Cleopatra to a new generation, it perpetuated the myths that obscured the reality of her reign. In contrast, modern adaptations have sought to present a more balanced portrayal. The mini-series Rome and the documentary Secrets of the Dead, Cleopatra's Lost Tomb, have attempted to explore her life within its historical context, shedding light on her political struggles while acknowledging her personal relationships. These retellings serve as reminders that Cleopatra was not merely a figure of intrigue, but a ruler who fought fiercely for her legacy. Ultimately, the legacy of Cleopatra is a complex tapestry woven from threads of truth, myth, and interpretation. Her story is a reminder of the power of narrative, how history can be reshaped by the perspectives of those who tell it. The fascination with her life speaks to the enduring human desire to understand the past, to grapple with the complexities of power, love, and identity. In the end, what do we owe to Cleopatra? It is not only the lessons learned from her political maneuvers or the cultural exchanges she fostered between Egypt and Rome. It is also the recognition of her humanity, a woman navigating the treacherous waters of her time, driven by ambition, love, and the desire to protect her homeland. Her story challenges us to reconsider the narratives that have been handed down through generations, to seek the truths that lie beneath the layers of myth. As we reflect on her legacy, we are invited to ponder the enduring impact of her choices and the lessons they impart. Cleopatra's life serves as a mirror, reflecting our own struggles for agency and recognition in a world often defined by power dynamics. In the quiet moments of contemplation, we find the echoes of her ambition, her resilience, and ultimately her indelible mark on history. Her legacy, steeped in both tragedy and triumph, continues to resonate through the ages. As night falls and we surrender to dreams, we can carry with us the essence of Cleopatra, a reminder of the complexities of life, the intertwining of love and power, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the quiet aftermath of Cleopatra's reign, as the dust settled upon the ancient stones of Alexandria, the story of this enigmatic queen invites us to ponder profound truths about human nature. Cleopatra's life, an intricate tapestry woven with ambition, love, and the relentless pursuit of power, echoes through the ages, revealing the complexities of our own desires and fears. Ambition, at its core, can be both a beacon and a burden. Cleopatra ascended to the throne at the tender age of 18, inheriting not just a kingdom, but a legacy fraught with conflict and expectation. In her quest to preserve Egypt's independence, she navigated treacherous waters, aligning herself with powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Each alliance was a calculated risk, a dance of seduction and strategy. As Plutarch noted, she was a woman of remarkable insight, and her charm was a weapon as potent as any sword. This reveals a fundamental aspect of human nature, the drive to forge connections, to leverage relationships for survival, in politics, in love, and in life. Yet this ambition often leads to peril. Cleopatra's alliances, while initially fruitful, spiraled into tragedy. The weight of her choices bore down upon her like the sun over the Nile, culminating in the crushing defeat at Actium. On that fateful day, September 2nd, 31 BC, her forces shattered, leaving her to grapple with not just the loss of power, but the potential loss of her children's futures. In her despair, Cleopatra embodied the stark reality of ambition's dual-edged sword, its potential to uplift, but also to destroy. The tale of Cleopatra also speaks to the enduring nature of love. Her passionate relationships with Caesar and Antony were not mere romantic entanglements. They were alliances forged out of necessity, deepened by genuine affection. In her final moments, as she chose to embrace death rather than live as a captive, her love for her children and her homeland remained paramount. As she famously said, "I will not be a slave to Rome," illustrating her fierce determination to retain her identity, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And what a failure! Cleopatra's legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy, reflecting the intricate dance between success and defeat that defines the human experience. She reminds us that power is fleeting, and even the most formidable can falter. Yet, it is in our failures that we often discover our true selves, our resilience. As we reflect on Cleopatra's life, we are confronted with the eternal questions of existence. What is worth striving for? What sacrifices are we willing to make? The answers lie not just in the annals of history, but within each of us, as we navigate our ambitions, our loves, and our own inevitable failures. In this deep contemplation, let us carry with us the lessons of Cleopatra. For within her story resides the essence of humanity itself, a tale of longing, of strength, and of the relentless spirit that endures even in the face of despair.